Hello, greetings, welcome. So, greetings to everybody. Welcome to today's session. I hope you are doing well. We are ready to continue. Hi, hello, good evening. Hi, hello. Okay, so welcome. Happy to see you. Let's continue. Not waste time. So I think last time we reached stanza 69. And now we are going to start with 70. So this is the kind of the wrapping up of this part of the text. So last time we reached stanza 69, which was saying that we should not think that it's not important to cultivate bodhicitta, right? So that was stanza 69. That if we say that there's no need to cultivate bodhicitta because the element is ever present, that would be a misunderstanding. So that was the explanation on stanza 69, that I explained that so even though the element is naturally present, that doesn't mean that from the conventional point of view of the practitioner, that there's no need to generate bodhicitta, and that there's no contradiction either. If you remember how we finished last time, stanza 69. So I explained that bodhicitta in application, it means that we're applying ourselves to this special kind of cause. What is the special kind of cause? The special kind of cause is the natural luminosity of the Dharmadhatu. That's naturally luminous pure mind. That itself is the cause. It's a strange cause, but it is. We can speak like that. You understand? So, and the conditions, the contributing conditions for the manifestation would be the natural qualities of the Dharmadhatu itself. So like that, from a conventional perspective, we can still speak of the need to cultivate bodhicitta without having any contradictions. So that was stanza 69. And now it goes a little bit further into that in the next three stanzas, which I will read all together. It says, stanza 70, it says, so I will read them. I will read the three of them at the same time. 70, 71, and 72. So 70. One who throws away the seed of sugar cane, but wants to taste the sweetness its fruit yields, will without the seed have no sugar at all. When someone values the seed from the sugar cane, maintains them well, and works to make them grow, a crop of sweetest sugar can be harvested. And just as what has come about like this, through valuing the bodhicitta fully, maintaining it and working it well, the Arhats, Patika Buddhas arise, and so the perfectly enlightened Buddhas. So this is now using a different kind of example. He's using a different kind of example now to explain what was the previous point. So this is the example of the sweetness of the sugar cane, which if we were to think that the sweetness of the sugar is something that is completely separated, if we think that the sweetness of the sugar is something completely different from, or unrelated from the sugar cane and from the seeds of the sugar cane, that is really like big delusion, right? Because we cannot separate, in a way, sugar comes from the sugar cane, and the sugar cane comes from the seeds of the sugar cane, and the seeds of the sugar cane come from the sugar cane, right? So this is all interrelated. You cannot really take one without the other. So in the same way, bodhicitta and Buddhahood, with all its qualities, are not really something different. So we have no contradiction when we say that the Buddha nature is already present in all beings, but at the same time we also say that it is necessary to cultivate bodhicitta and the path of the 10 paramitas to unfold its qualities. Do you understand? There is no contradiction here in these statements. Sometimes we can think that it's like a paradox, and sometimes we speak like this. When we are not explaining very deeply, we can kind of leave it like as a kind of a paradox of the spiritual path, But if we start to study the Dharma properly and to understand, then we can understand like this. There's no paradox. It's really different things. Because the 10 paramitas and the bodhicitta, they are not something separate from the element. Do you understand? If we would think that the paramitas and the bodhicitta would be something really separate from the element, something distinct from it, then we would have a problem. Because now we have to establish a really kind of a relationship between two existing different entities. But there's no entities, and there's no need to establish a relationship, because they're not truly something different. That's the point here. You understand? The paramitas and the bodhicitta are not, the paramitas, the bodhicitta, are not something other, separate from the element, fundamentally. That is the really important point to understand. We can say that in the beginning, it appears to be. That this separate. It appears that we have something that we call the bodhicitta. It appears that there's something we call the paramitas. And it appears that there's something called the Buddha nature, All these things seem to be like separate things we're talking about. And we cultivate the bodhicitta, we speak about cultivating the paramitas, and we speak about revealing the Buddha nature. It's like we're talking about different things. But this is only, it appears like this in the beginning. But then at the end, we would realize that these 10 paramitas are spontaneously present in the Buddha mind, in the Buddha nature. Maybe another example that I can use, I think I kind of referred to it last time. There was a question about this, and I already sort of used this example a little bit, but I just think maybe I can develop it a little bit further. This example that I used last time. If you, it's maybe not as good as the sugarcane example of Nagarjuna, but I think as a complement, maybe it's useful to understand. If you think, if you would have something like something that looks like a ball of ropes, something that you look like, and it looks like a ball of threads you don't know, just like a lump, like a ball of entangled lump of threads or ropes, like this, all tangled up, and you look and you see that there's a little, in the middle of all that, there's one little end sticking out. You grab that end that is sticking out, and you start to pull on that. You keep pulling, and at the end, you have one single rope stretched out. You see, it was always just one rope. Always. It was always just one rope. But in the beginning, it didn't look like it. In the beginning, it looked like just this entangled mess of spaghetti. But once you pick that thread and you start to pull, you think, there's one thread there. And you start to pull on that thread. And then it's just one rope. It was always just one rope. That thread that you saw in the beginning and you started to pull from, and it was always just the same. So I think it's not a perfect example, but I think you get the point. I hope you get the point that we can't really separate these things. That's why we can speak about bodhicitta as being appears to be a causal factor, and the enlightened qualities appear to be the conditions. The paramitas appear to be the what makes the element unfold. But it just appears to be. It appears to be. That's I think the point I'm trying to make, or Nagarjuna is trying to make. Okay. And this is why we speak, from the Mahayana perspective, we speak of the three types of bodhicitta, right? There's the bodhicitta in aspiration, the bodhicitta in application, and then there's let's make it properly. So there's two kinds. There's what we call the relative bodhicitta and the ultimate bodhicitta. Relative and ultimate. The relative bodhicitta, it's separated into two, which is the bodhicitta in aspiration and the bodhicitta in application. So both of these, the bodhicitta in aspiration and the bodhicitta in application, they are the relative bodhicitta. Then there's the ultimate bodhicitta. So this is the same meaning you see when you speak of the relative bodhicitta. Aspiration, it's like, this is the aspiration that attain total awakening, myself and all living beings. And then application is to apply the training, listening, meditating, reflecting, the 10 paramitas, and so on. Application. Right? And so this is the relative bodhicitta, aspiration and application. And then once we realize the real ultimate nature, that ultimate nature is called the ultimate bodhicitta. So it's the same meaning, you understand? It's never different. It just appears differently, like this. Okay, then 73. Just as seeds of rice and other plants are treated by the farmer with great care, aspirants who wish to make the greatest journey are treated by their guides with greatest care. So now this is a little bit talking about the activity of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, by saying that just like farmers guard their plants with care so that they can grow fully and produce fruit, in the same way, those beings who truly make this great bodhisattva vow and really apply with compassion, and really apply, they cultivate the bodhicitta in aspiration and the bodhicitta in application. Also those are like the little plants. Yeah? Those are like the little plants. And they're also protected. They are protected by the Buddhas. They are protected by the Bodhisattvas. So if someone is truly applying this bodhicitta as the Bodhisattva vow genuinely in their heart, and is truly applying, cultivating this bodhicitta in aspiration and application, then they are naturally protected by the Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are always watching over them, always looking. They have no moment of privacy. Always being spied on, always protected by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This is very much true. You can find many examples, in in the history of the past masters, great masters, many things happened that really show that the bodhisattvas sometimes intervene directly to save their lives sometimes, or to when something is really important, like this. In many different kinds of cases it is like this. And even to help to propagate the Dharma, for example, also they intervene sometimes like this. There's many examples, like Atisha, for example, almost he was very sick, and he prayed to Tara. Tara appeared to him and told him like this and saved his life. Also, Tara told him to go to Tibet. It was so very important. She said to him, "You will die there." She said, "You will die there, but you should go anyway. It's very important for the Dharma." And Xuanzang also, and we can find his story, and Chunyun with Majushri. There's so many examples, all of us then I have a blank, but there's many examples you can read in the biographies and the stories of when bodhisattvas intervene sometimes directly in some situations. And even if it's not something immediately visible, if someone truly has bodhicitta and practices, for sure you're being spied on. Okay. But of course this is really like, it depends, it depends, right? It depends how much of our mind is actually on the bodhicitta, right? If maybe our mind is on the bodhicitta maybe 5 minutes a day, then I'm not sure. I think bodhisattvas maybe have other things to do, But if our mind is in the bodhicitta, like, continuously, then yeah, for sure. I think maybe a little bit of a joke I can say like this. If the mind is on the bodhicitta 5 minutes a day, then maybe the bodhisattvas are protecting 5 minutes a day. Something like this. If the mind is on the bodhicitta 24 hours a day, then the bodhisattvas are protecting 24 hours a day. Something like this. So we also have to be realistic. It's nice to say these things and people feel very, oh, so nice. But it depends on what our mind is busy with. If our mind is mostly busy with, I don't know, food, money, climate change, romance stories, love stories, boys, girls, all these type of things. If that's the most, it's like, if that's like, like big chunk of our energy, I think maybe bodhisattvas then maybe have other things to do, So we need to take care of these things also and understand. This is very real in a sense. And again, as I said, there's many stories where practitioners really have intervened directly. So this is supposed to be like also an inspiration to develop our bodhicitta, to understand that this is the most important thing there is. There is nothing more important than this. The purpose of human being, the purpose of all beings, really, right? But other beings maybe don't have capacity. Maybe like, animals. Animals don't really have much capacity. They can't understand. They can't apply. Very difficult. Beings in other realms also very difficult. So, of course, it's the purpose of all beings. But in particular, human beings, because we are human beings, we're talking together. So the main purpose of human beings, human life, is to attain awakening, is to attain liberation, to attain Buddhahood. That's the main purpose. That's the purpose of life. Is that. That's it. Everything else is supporting conditions, And this is probably the most difficult thing to really come to terms with these days. And we are back on the refuge. We are back on the refuge, right? We keep going around, keep coming back to the refuge. As I said, there's really no different. Once you understand this, refuge, bodhicitta, all these things, it all comes back to this point. Because otherwise it's very difficult to really make any genuine sort of progress, if you want to talk like this more relative way. But we have to understand, like it says here in this stanza, those who wish to make the greatest journey, because this is the greatest journey, this is the only journey. Actually, it's not the greatest journey, it's the only journey. Actually, I would say like this, is the only journey. Everything else is just going around in circles. It's not a journey, The only journey to awakening, to complete enlightenment, that is the only purpose of life, is that. And for people that are really interested in the Buddha Dharma and the spiritual path, in particular the Buddha Dharma, these days, in our current times, this is a big challenge. Refuge is a big challenge, a very big problem, to understand refuge, to apply refuge. Because there's so many kind of strange ideas and so much pull from other type of ideologies, if you will, that people think that they can make nirvana. Maybe people think they can make an enlightened world here. This is not possible. The best world that we can do is the world where people want to be enlightened, because then everybody behaves very nice by themselves. Do you understand? Without making conflicts with other people, without forcing other people to do something that without forcing anything upon anybody else. If everybody wants to be Buddha, that's the best we can. That's the best we could get. Actually, there's no better way. Any other attempts will be worse. So, for anyone that truly wants to enter the Buddha Dharma path, you must understand refuge. There's nothing superior to that, because the most important goal of human being is Buddhahood. In that great journey for Buddhahood that he speaks here, in that great journey towards Buddhahood, then human beings help each other, support each other. They can sing and dance together, But that's the goal. And if that's the goal with seriousness, then the Bodhisattvas are here, they're present, and they're helping, and everything goes kind of smooth. If not, I'm not sure. Big problem. Very big problem. So it is very important to understand refuge, bodhicitta, to really apply. What do you want to do in life? Think about this very carefully. That's my advice to you, really. Anyway, rambling on. Rambling. Okay, B3.4. B3.4. Is question? What's the question? Is refuge just needed as long as there is a path? Buddha don't need refuge. Earlier on, when there is no self-grasping anymore, is there a need for refuge? If there is Buddha don't need the refuge. No, Buddha is the refuge. Buddha is the refuge. When there is no self-grasping anymore, is there still need for refuge? When there is no self-grasping anymore, that is the refuge. That is the refuge. It's the same thing. It's the refuge. We speak of different levels of refuge, right? We speak of the outer refuge, like the Buddha, from an outer perspective. We speak of the inner refuge as there's different ways to explain that, but just let's say the inner refuge as like the deity, for example, like in Vajrayāna, the deity. And then there's the ultimate refuge, which is the Dharmadhatu, the Dharmadhatu, that's the ultimate refuge. They're not different. It's again the same thing as I was talking about. They're not different. They may seem different in the beginning. In the beginning, we may think it is different. Like there's the Buddha, there's the deity, there's the Dharmadhatu, or the Dharmakaya, but these things are the same. In the beginning, we say, take refuge in the Buddha, because it's easy, because people can relate. It's like more dualistic way, but people can relate, the Buddha, or then the deity. Take refuge in the deity. Oh, yeah, because the Buddha is something more impersonal. The Buddha is something more distant. The deity is more personal somehow. You can have your preferred deity that you kind of make a relationship with, and then you take refuge in the deity and you practice the deity and so on. And then there's the refuge in the ultimate nature, Rigpa, or the nature of the mind, or Dharmadhatu, Dharmakaya. But for that, you need to have already more kind of capacity. You need to kind of understand what that is in terms of your experience. Then you can take refuge in that. But in the end, they're all the same. The Buddha, the deity, the Dharmakaya, it's the same thing. You just, as you go along, you start to understand that. And this duality between you and Buddha sort of collapses. But refuge, yeah, you need refuge on the path. Yeah, absolutely. Refuge is the path. Also, you can say like this, I suppose. Refuge is the path. And it's the result. And it's the result. Refuge is everything. Becoming like a teacher now. Anyway, I hope that answered your question. B 3.4, the manner of unfolding. So now it goes to explain how is it that this Buddha nature unfolds. Because before it was like, how it unfolds with the 10 paramitas, and now it's like the way it appears to unfold, the way this element appears to unfold. So 74, just as on the 14th day of waning, the moon is barely visible at all, for aspirants who wish to make the greatest journey, the kayas are but barely visible. So just on the 14th day of waning, the moon is barely visible. For aspirants who wish to make the greatest journey, the kayas are barely visible. So here he's speaking about like the waxing moon appears to be only a little bit visible. Even though the moon is there, the moon is never incomplete, right? The moon is always full there, by its own side. But when we look in the beginning of this stage, it appears the moon is barely visible. So in the same way, for the beginners in the path, the kayas, the 3 kayas, the Dharmakaya and so on, only manifest in very subtle ways. It's very, very difficult to see. Very difficult to see. And then continue, 75. Just as the moon, when it is new, visibly grows larger bit by bit, those who have reached the bhumis see the Dharmakaya more and more. Just as the moon, when it is new, visibly grows larger bit by bit, those who have reached the bhumis see the Dharmakaya more and more. So then he says that as one reaches the path of seeing, as one reaches the first bhumi, and has this first direct experience of the nature of reality, or this non-conceptual realization of emptiness, then one enters what's called the stages of the cultivation, of the meditation path. Then, just as the moon is increasing day by day, then for those who have entered the path of the bhumis, then the vision of the 3 kayas become increasingly clear. Again, remember, the moon is always there complete. It's never being produced. It is just, it appears to like this. It's like the moon appearing in the sky. Day after day, it becomes bigger. It appears to become bigger and bigger. if that's an illusion, but that's how it appears. So the same way, it's like this for practitioners. And then 76, just as on the 15th day of waxing, the moon has reached completion and is full, just so for those who've reached the Bhumi's end point, the Dharmakaya shines complete and clear. So once the end is reached, this full moon shines full. So the display of the Dharmakaya is unobscured. The full display of the Dharmakaya is unobscured. With all the mandalas, all the Buddhas, all the Buddhas and Buddhist mandalas, all the qualities, all the displays of the Buddha mind, everything. And then as they reach the first Bhumi, now there's something visible, clearly. And then as they progress through the stages, it becomes it's like the moon becoming growing, and it becomes fully there. The moon was never the moon was always there, complete from the beginning, right? That's again this illusion of development, this illusion of making something. There was never nothing to make, and yet the path manifests in this way. So the clearing of these obscurations like this. From the beginning, you've never been anything other than Buddha. That's just the point here. So, and now we go into the explanation of the different paths. Here in this text is a brief explanation, but it's very good for an introduction, because to try to teach this topic of the Bhumis, the paths, the stages, immediately, completely from the beginning, that will be quite difficult, because it's actually a very extensive topic. But in this text, there's a brief introduction, which is good. Maybe another time we can then develop and go deeper into this. But as an introduction, this is quite good. So B341, the path of accumulation. So stanza 77, the bodhicitta perfectly engendered through stable and consistent dedication to the Buddha, to the Dharma, and to the Sangha, does not decrease and develops more and more. So here is referring to the path of accumulation. In this text, there's not really a direct link here to the path of junction, but I will explain it anyway, because they're kind of connected. They're kind of together, maybe here. It goes straight. Okay, so I remember last time I spoke, or several times before, I spoke about the 5 paths. The 5 paths. So paths of accumulation, paths of accumulation, paths of junction, paths of seeing, paths of meditation or cultivation, and paths of no more training. It's important to remember this. This is kind of basic knowledge, Path of accumulation, paths of junction, paths of seeing, paths of cultivation or meditation. You can sometimes you hear it one way. It's the same. Paths of cultivation or paths of meditation, same thing. And the 5th, path of no more training. These are the 5 stages of the path to Buddhahood from the perspective of the Mahayana. In Dzogchen we have slightly different. In Dzogchen we have a different kind of categorization of the stages of the path, which is smaller. It's only like 4. But to understand the 5 paths of the Mahayana is very important, because if we understand the 5 paths of the Mahayana, then all the other categorizations somehow fit into this. They're just different ways to put the milestones, if you will. And as I said, this is a very vast topic, and I will just really give a very superficial introduction to this on this text, because the topic of the stages is in the Mahayana teachings. This is very detailed. Exactly what happens, what the practitioner is doing, what is their mental experience, what is their obscurations, what is purified, what is the result. So it's like a map. Think of it as a really detailed guide map of the path, where it really step by step tells you what is the practice, what is the obstacles, what is the purifications, what is the signs of result, all of it is like mapped out all the way from the beginning to the end of the Buddhahood. Everything is mapped out in this 5 path. So it's a very vast topic. We would just now really touch the beginning here, like a general introduction. So it says here in stanza 77, it refers to the path of accumulation. I could say also the path of junction is there included somehow, even though it's not specifically mentioned, because it jumps from the path of accumulation to the path of seeing immediately. So we put everything together on 77. So the bodhicitta, perfectly engendered through stable and consistent dedication to the Buddha, to the Dharma, to the Sangha, does not decrease and develops more and more. I would say that this develops more and more would be the path of junction. So the first part, the rest of the stanza is the path of accumulation, and the last little bit develops more and more. It would be the path of junction, something like this. So very brief introduction again. So after taking refuge, first I must take refuge and cultivate bodhicitta in aspiration and application. With that support, then the practitioner engages in the practice of the paramitas. And through the practice of the paramitas, they will walk through the path of accumulation, or traverse what's called the path of accumulation, until they reach the path of junction. And it is the path of junction where the first signs of manifestation of the primordial wisdom start to manifest. So, from the point of view of the Mahayana, the path of accumulation is divided into 3 stages, which is called the lower path of accumulation, the middle path of accumulation, and the higher path of accumulation. And each one of these, the lower path of accumulation, the middle, and the higher, again, each one is defined very concretely what it is. What is the practice, specifically, what is practiced there, what is realized, what is attained, what is purified, and so on. And it's actually very important to gradually come to learn these things. So these 3, lower, accumulation, middle, and higher. So, but in general, during the path of accumulation as a whole, we can say that the four noble truths and the understanding, or that the understanding of the Four Noble Truths and the understanding of the conventional, the 2 realities, the conventional reality and ultimate reality, are really start to be understood conceptually. Okay, so in the path of accumulation, the practitioner really starts to understand this, the Four Noble Truths and the conventional reality and absolute reality, more conceptual way. And through that, the mind starts to turn away from a wrong perspective, from wrong ways of understanding reality and opinions, and from this perception of things being truly existing to the real self and so on. So all these wrong ideas are corrected. And one starts to understand also what is productive, what is leading to awakening and what is not, what is counterproductive. So one starts to understand what are the virtuous qualities to be cultivated and what are the things that are to be kind of removed. And one starts to really engage in that until it becomes something really very concrete, and to stabilize the mind, to stabilize, to practice meditation, to stabilize the mind completely, and so on. So, a very general explanation. So, in general, in the path of accumulation, the practitioner is establishing the basis for the path, gathering the proper conditions and gathering all the positive factors. And this is mainly done by what I keep repeating all the time, the 3 trainings, right? Listening to teaching, study, reflecting, and meditation, and the practice of the paramitas, right? So we can say in very broad terms that the path of accumulation is mostly consists of this. towards the end of the positive accumulation, really at the end of the positive accumulation, of the higher positive accumulation, then the practitioner will no longer engage in negative actions, and no longer feels even like doing it. Even the idea of doing something unvirtuous doesn't even arise in their minds, and even any suggestion to do it, I don't want, like this, but completely, like, for example, and there's completely only this engaging in virtue, like natural, like continuously, like this. And also the practitioner will attain mental stability, like samadhi. So the attainment of samadhi, or like mental stability, that's achieved at the end of the passive accumulation. Okay, just to give you an idea. Okay, like this. A general samadhi. No, it doesn't mean like that, because there's many different levels, so to speak. But the basic capacity to the basic capacity to put the mind undistracted for some amount of time, that's attained at the end of the passive accumulation. Then there's the passive junction. So the passive junction, sometimes it's also called the passive linking. Linking, junction, is same meaning, right? And it's called linking or junction because it is kind of in between. It's like joining what is an ordinary being in the passive accumulation and an arya, a liberated being, which is in the bhumis. So it's kind of in between stage, so to speak. Someone in the passive junction is, in a roughly way, we could say that someone in the passive junction is neither. A person that is a practitioner that is in the passive junction, you cannot really say that they're ordinary being anymore, but they're not liberated either. They're in this junction. They're in the junction. Okay, like this. So at this stage, the non-conceptual primordial awareness is compared to a fire that burns away all the deluded concepts. So in the passive junction, when the practitioner reaches the passive junction, there's the first arisal, very clear, of this primordial wisdom. And that's the time when the practitioner really starts to work with primordial wisdom. And that primordial wisdom, which is like a fire, that will lead then to the passive seeing. And as I just said, and so that's why it's called injunction, because it's intermediate state between the preparation, the accumulation path, and the realization, the passive seeing. The passive junction is has 4 parts, 4 stages in it. Okay, which again, I'll put this in the notes in the annotated version so that you can come back later to it. Again, very, very brief introduction to this. So the passive junction has 4 stages. The first one is called heat. Yeah, heat like fire. Heat. Summit like the peak. Forbearance. And supreme dharma, or supreme dharma, supreme worldly dharma, depends on the translation. So the first stage of the passive junction, the first point. So as one goes through the passive accumulation, reaches the higher passive accumulation, the mind abandons all negativities, the mind abandons all unvirtue, and becomes fully focused on virtue, attains mental stability, or the capacity, at least the capacity for mental stability. And then at some point one enters what's called the passive junction. Now primordial wisdom arises. it enters the stage, and that first stage is called heat. Or warmth. Sometimes it's also called warmth, and it's called warmth or heat for the reason I just explained before. Because through now meditating in this way with the union of shamatha and this insight which is the primordial wisdom. This primordial wisdom is, in the beginning, is very weak. It's like a little flame of a candle, you know. It's very, very weak. There's like this little flame, very small. But this is the primordial wisdom that appears in the first stage of the passive junction. It's a very small flame. And by applying this inner clarity of awareness starts to grow, okay, starts to develop. And that's why it's called heat. Like this fire starts to grow. Then the second stage of the passive junction is called summit. And during this stage of the summit, the practitioner starts to experience a concrete realization of the meaning of emptiness of intrinsic nature. Like the understanding, the realization of the lack of intrinsic nature starts to become manifested and to develop. It might not be stable, it might not be really clear all the time, it might be off and on, but it starts to appear. It's called summit. Then the next stage, and then the practitioner continues to meditate with this fire of primordial wisdom. And then he reaches this third stage, which is called forbearance. And it's called forbearance because forbearance, like patience, acceptance. And this stage is called forbearance because any leftovers, any remnants, any traces of fear or hesitation regarding the emptiness of self disappear. Until then, there's a little bit of this fear of losing myself, this hesitation, what's going to happen to myself. And the level called forbearance, when one reaches forbearance, that's completely gone, disappears. So at that point, the practitioner attains a clear view that all conditioned phenomena manifest as expressions of the mind. And also, they have a limited experience, not complete, a limited experience, that the mind itself is empty of inherent existence. So they start to have that clear experience in a very decisive way. And that's called forbearance. And then the last one is called Supreme Dharma. So the practitioner continues to meditate like this until they come to the very clear realization that the subjective perceiving mind has no independent nature. So once they reach this point, the passive seeing, which is the next stage, comes right immediately there. So that's a very brief explanation of the passive accumulation and the passive junction. Then stanza 78, the first bhumi, the passive seeing. So 78 says, through the ground of darkness all relinquished, and the ground of brightness firmly seized, it is ascertained right at this point. Therefore, it is designated joy. So once we reach the bhumis, so the 10 bhumis. So again, I'm repeating a lot so you remember. So again, passive accumulation, 3 stages, lower, middling, and high passive accumulation, then passive junction, which has 4 stages, right? Heat, summit, forbearance, and supreme dharma. And then we enter the bhumis, the 10 bhumis, 10 stages. So the first bhumi is called the passive seeing, in terms of the 5 paths. The first bhumi is called the passive seeing. And all the bhumis all the bhumis have a name. They're named. So we can just call them, normally we just call them by their numbers, first, second, third, and so on. But they have names, actually. They all of them have a name. The first one, the first bhumi, is called joyous, or perfect joy, or great joy, or some translation like this. Pure joy, the joyous one, something like this. That's the name of the first bhumi. So that's what Nagarjuna is saying there, the last line. Therefore, it is designated joy. So he's referring to the first bhumi, which is the path of seeing. So same thing. So we've gone through the path of accumulation. We take refuge, cultivate bodhicitta, apply, understand the Four Noble Truths, turn the mind, understand the conventional ultimate reality, apply meditation, stabilize the mind, stop doing negative things, cultivate virtue, and all that will take us to the path of junction. The mind attains stability, and primordial wisdom shows its head, fire, and then by cultivating that fire, primordial wisdom, one goes through the stages of the path of junction until here, the path of seeing. Okay, so very, very brief explanation. And once we reach the path of seeing, so that's the same thing to saying that, first of all the gross defilements. So when you speak of the defilements of like anger, desire, pride, and so on. So the gross forms of these defilements are totally purified, totally removed. So and this also is the moment where there's for the first time a complete, direct, non-conceptual perception of the Four Noble Truths. So this is the first time where the practitioner does a complete non-conceptual perception of the Four Noble Truths. I'm saying it correctly. Of the Four Noble Truths. It's not just about emptiness. It's part of that. The Four Noble Truths themselves are completely cognized directly, non-conceptually, at this moment. So the path of seeing is also the moment where the practitioner stops being an ordinary person, and we start to talk about an Arya. The Sanskrit word is Arya, like we use sometimes like Arya Nagarjuna, or Arya Tada. This word Arya. Arya refers to someone who has gone past at least the first bhumi. It means a noble being. Is no longer ordinary. Is no longer a samsaric being. Okay, the moment someone reaches the first bhumi, they are no longer samsaric being. They are beyond samsara already. So we call them an Arya. So without getting into too much details, it is explained in the sutras that this moment, when the practitioner reaches this moment of the first bhumi, there's an insight into the Four Noble Truths. And that insight happens in a very specific way. There's a very particular experience that is had, that is very detailedly described. And it happens in 16 successive instants. Like 16. Like sometimes it seems that they are simultaneous. Sometimes they are immediately one after the other. There's different ways to understand that, but it doesn't matter. There's the most important here is that there's 16 understandings. There's 16 instances of realization. If they happen one after the other, or if they happen at the same time, that's actually irrelevant. That's what I'm trying to say. But there's 16 very particular ones, which correspond to the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. So if you go to the Buddhist silence, in the Buddhist silence it's there. You can read there what they are. I explained there in brief. What are the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths? That's what it refers to, is this. So at that moment, the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths are directly, non-conceptually, directly perceived. And in general, we say that there's 4 aspects that come into manifestation at this point. There's 2 aspects that are related to forbearance, or kind of acceptance, or 2 aspects of accepting something, and 2 aspects of direct knowledge, direct perception. So, for example, so in terms of acceptance or forbearance, so the first moment, I'm running out of time, the first moment related to forbearance is a total acceptance, a total and complete acceptance without any resistance whatsoever to the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, the truth of the nature of suffering, in relation to the desire realm. The second is a direct knowledge of the truth of suffering. So remember, I said there's 2. There's one aspect that is connected with acceptance, and there's another which is connected with direct knowing. 2 different aspects. One is accepting and one is direct knowing. And it's the same object. So there's a complete and total acceptance of the truth of suffering, and there's at the same time there's a complete and total knowledge, direct perception of the truth of suffering. Together like this. And this happens in relation to the 3 to all the realms, so desire realm, form realm, formless realms. So at that moment the practitioner has this view, this direct knowledge of what is the meaning of the first noble truth of suffering in all the realms of existence. It's like directly seen. And at the same time, a total acceptance of that. And when I mean acceptance here, is not like, oh, okay, I accept. No, it's really like, yeah, that's it. Like this. So, and the same thing happens to the other noble truths. So there's a complete acceptance of the truth of the cause of suffering, and a direct perception of the cause of suffering. There's a complete acceptance of what is the cessation of suffering, and direct perception of what is the cessation of suffering. There's a complete acceptance of what is the path to the cessation, and there's a direct knowledge of what is the path. So all of these come like this together, like that. Like in one moment, like there. Like. That's why I said before that it's only in the path of seeing that the Four Noble Truths will be completely, really fully realized, actually. You can understand a little bit. And then at this moment when all this comes together, immediately there's like this total, directly non-conceptual realization of the nature of reality, and immediately that marks the end of the path of seeing as well, like this, or the beginning of what we call the path of meditation, right? The path of meditation. There's much more, doesn't matter. Just brief introduction. It's okay. So maybe something else useful to say. So in relation to the 10 paramitas, because remember I said that the 10 paramitas we looked before, that these are related to the 10 bhumis, that each bhumi is connected to one paramita, right? So the path of seeing, during the path of seeing, or at the time of the path of seeing, the Arya, the Bodhisattva, perfects the paramita of generosity. It's the first one. The paramita of generosity is perfected at the end of the path of seeing. Okay, that's the first one. Then second one, I'm going to continue a little bit if you don't mind. Otherwise, become a little bit late in the text. Okay, the second one, stainless, second bhumi. So the second bhumi is called stainless. So stanza 79. What's been tainted through all times by the stains of passion and so forth, and is pure now without stains, that is called the stainless one. So the second bhumi is called the stainless. And I very brief description. I'm not going to go into much details here at all. So in this stage of the, so now we are in the path of meditation, right? The path of cultivation. It starts here. So remember, 5 paths. I'm repeating a lot, so you remember 5 paths: path of accumulation, path of junction, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more training. Right? 5 paths. So path of seeing we already saw. Now this marks the second bhumi is the beginning of the path of meditation, path of cultivation, if you want to say it like that. So, and that's called stainless. So here during this stage of the path, it is mostly the stains of desire that is being eliminated. In particular, it is the subtle aspects of desire, because you remember, I just said that once you reach the first bhumi, all the gross defilements are completely gone. So desire, anger, pride, jealousy. Well, there's other categories to speak about this, but it doesn't matter. So all the gross forms of defilements. So when you speak of desire, it's completely purified in the first bhumi, but it's the gross form, the afflictive form of desire. That's purified. But there's a subtle desire still left. What is this subtle desire that is still left? Probably I can't really easily explain that, because you need to go beyond the gross desire to see what is the subtle desire. But there is still a subtle desire left, a subtle something there holding, and that's still there, and that's now being purified in this second bhumi. And in relation to the paramitas, it is the paramita of ethical discipline that is perfected in this second stage. So it is called stainless. It is called stainless because the actions of body, speech, and mind become completely without any stain, naturally, spontaneously stainless actions of body, speech, and mind, like this, free from generosity. All the gross defilements are already gone, right? They were purified in the path of seeing. Generosity was perfected in the path of seeing, and now subtle desire is purified here. So the paramita of ethical discipline becomes perfected. So all the actions of body, speech, and mind are stainless. Then the third stage, the third bhumi, called illuminating, stanza 80. Once affliction's net is rent asunder, a flawless wisdom shines, and with its light purifies all darkness past all limits, removing it, and hence it illuminates. So it's called illuminating. The third bhumi is called illuminating. So having purified all the afflictions of desire and attachment, which were purified in the first, so the first bhumi is it's the paramita of generosity. So attachment and desire have been purified also in the second paramita. Here, in this one, the paramita of patience is perfected, and the subtle aspect of anger or aversion, is purified. Because again, remember, only the gross afflictions were purified in the path of seeing. Now the subtle aspects, the subtle leftovers, are purified now. And here, perfecting the paramita of patience and the subtle aversion is purified. And from this part of the path, there's a vast wisdom that develops, that radiates forth. And this wisdom that radiates forth from this some meditation, from this samadhi of this stage, it brings benefit to countless worlds and sentient beings. It's like this bright light of wisdom that illuminates everywhere. And that's why it's called all illuminating. You need to understand that when we speak about these bhumis now, bodhisattvas in these bhumis, these are not ordinary practitioners anymore, okay? We're talking about really like holy beings, okay? It's not your average, yogi somewhere, If you study later, if you study this in much more detail, you'll see how bodhisattvas in these bhumis, they already have great capacity to manifest emanations, like hundreds and thousands of emanations and so on, and go. So we are at a different level talking right now, okay? We're just looking at the map ahead, so to speak, But this is already other transcending, like this. So then there's the fourth bhumi called radiant. So stanza 81, I think I'll finish maybe here. Stanza 81, I have to go to the 7th. Anyway, so 81, the fourth bhumi, it shines with light that is always pure. Primordial awareness which eliminates diversion is steeped in light which shines on every side. This bhumi hence is known as radiant. So the fourth bhumi is called radiant. It is called radiant because the bodhisattvas that are training at this level, they constantly emanate this kind of wisdom sort of expression which purifies the emotional and conceptual afflictions. And by increasingly deeper wisdom and abiding in samadhi, in specific the samadhi that they're training at this level, they eliminate completely the subtle aspects of laziness. And so this is connected with the perfection of the paramita of diligence. So the paramita of diligence is perfected here at this stage. Yeah, okay, that's enough. Then 82, fifth bhumi. Since awareness, feats and crafts are mastered here, the range of meditative concentrations themselves and clashes difficult to purify completely have been vanquished. So difficult to overcome is its name. So the fifth bhumi is called difficult to overcome. That's the name, difficult to overcome. So here, at this stage of the meditation of the bodhisattva, some of the most difficult latent aspects of habitual tendencies that are still, we're talking about very subtle things here, okay? You have to understand this. It's difficult to explain, to talk, to understand this, because we're talking about things that maybe practitioners that are still on the path of accumulation don't really have access to seeing in their own minds, So these very subtle aspects of these very strong latent tendencies, these are much harder to purify than the gross ones. The gross tendencies, these are much easier because you can see them easier. They're gross. You can kind of handle with that and you work with it. But the more subtle ones, the very kind of entrenched, subtle. This is much more difficult to clean, you know. It's like with a stain, you know. If you have a big stain in a cloth, you can wash it, and maybe the darkest thing you can eliminate, but sometimes there's those stains that you can wash it and wash it and wash it, and there's always a little thing there left. It's almost impossible to remove. You know what I mean? So it's a bit like this. So these very subtle leftovers of some strong tendencies, this is very hard to eliminate. So this part of the path is called difficult to overcome. And in this case, the paramita that is connected to this stage, is perfected here, is the paramita of samadhi, of meditative concentration. So the paramita of meditative concentration, of samadhi, is perfected on this stage. And is also, as a result of that, it is also in this stage where there's really a profound, much more profound realization of the two truths, of the conventional and ultimate, and the union of them, how that really is. And many different kinds of samadhis are perfected in this stage. Again, I'm giving a very broad stroke, kind of, just to give you kind of an idea of what this means. I want to go to the seventh bhumi, if you don't mind, almost there. So then we have stanza 83, the sixth bhumi, called clear knowing. It says, with enlightenment of all three types included, and everything perfected and complete, with birth no more, disintegration finished, this level is directly manifest. So Nagarjuna is calling it directly manifest. I'm using a different name from a different source, a more common list, called clear knowing. Similar meaning. Six bhumis, clear knowing or directly manifest, similar point. So in this bhumi, the bodhisattvas perfect the paramita of wisdom, prajna paramita. So here is where that's really fully sort of realized. They realize the complete realization of, like, not complete, I'm exaggerating, but they realize the quality of samsara and nirvana, the profound meaning, the inner and subtle meaning of dependent arising. Yeah? So this direct seeing and subtle, all the subtle aspects of this union of samsara and nirvana and dependent arising, this is realized here. At this point, this is a very important point. That's why I wanted to get here, because I wanted to kind of close the teaching here today, and then we continue. At the sixth bhumi, at the reaching of the sixth bhumi, this is the point where there's a kind of a, where there's a kind of a sidetrack, so to speak. There's a kind of a crossroad here. So at the point of reaching the sixth bhumi, there's a possible entry point to nirvana. So here at the sixth bhumi, the bodhisattva could drift or could go into nirvana. It is possible here. The cessation, the state of cessation we call nirvana. Here it becomes possible. They can go there from here. The only reason, or the only way that is prevented, or the only way that doesn't happen, is due to the power of aspirations to benefit beings, bodhicitta. Upon reaching this point, the sixth bhumi, where there's this paramita of the prajna paramita is realized, the equality of samsara and nirvana, the inner meaning. After everything that was done already so far, at this point, the door to nirvana is there. Number like this, the door is there. You just walk in cessation. The only thing that prevents that from happening is bodhicitta. But here, bodhicitta is no longer like thinking, because we are very far from that now. It is not like, oh no, I cannot go to, it's not like the sixth Bhumi Bodhisattva is there in his samadhi in form realm somewhere, and like, oh, nirvana, oh, no, I cannot go there. I should have compassion. I should not go to. No, it's not like this. It is because of the bodhicitta that was generated in the path. Do you understand? The force of that bodhicitta, the force of that aspiration to benefit beings that was generated all throughout the path is because of that they don't go into the door of nirvana and they continue to the seventh bhumi, okay, which is for next time, next episode of the journey. This is the great journey, This is the great journey, and this is a very simple explanation. But as I said, this is a very big topic. In this text from Nagarjuna himself, Nagarjuna only gives a brief one stanza for each stage. So it's sort of just like an overview, so to speak, of this kind of how the path goes. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm just giving you an overview. Later, if you want to, you can go deeper and more detailed on these things. But for now, I think this is good for you to have a general understanding of what the roadmap sort of is. Otherwise, very strange. We don't know where we're going. What is the map? Where am I? Where am I? Maybe I'm Buddha already. Some people think like this. I'm Buddha already. I have a right realization. And then they study about the 5 paths and the 10 bhumis, and like, ooh, not sure. We need to practice. Very important. Greatest journey in the world. Any questions? No questions? If there is no questions, then I wish you a good evening, and we continue the journey on the next bhumi, on the next Thursday, I think, right? Thursday. Okay, there's a question. Very often throughout the text, the writing description sounds so poetic. Is it meant to be like that, or is it really like that? I'm not sure I understand the question. It is an actual description. You mean you are referring to these stanzas on the bhumis? You're talking about those in particular? Yes. Uh, yes, no, it it is really description. It is really like this. It is a very poetic. It is a very poetic text in itself. You know, the praises in general, the text and the praises, they are very poetic in nature, um, but they are how to say they are written in a poetic way to because they are praises, right? So remember that Nagarjuna is offering praise, you know, and when offering praise, you make it beautiful, but at the same time, he's transmitting something concrete. He's teaching something. He's transmitting the teachings in a very precise manner. So the language is quite crafted in a very specific way to transmit the teachings correctly, exactly what it is, but in a poetic way. And this is quite common. It's not unusual at all in this type of teachings. Actually, it is quite common. You find this quite commonly. This kind of putting together of making poetic but at the same time is very carefully crafted so that it's very precise, which also makes it quite difficult sometimes to understand without commentary because there's sometimes a lot of things are packed in there, you know, in order to make it poetic and simple in short stanzas. There's a lot of things that are a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, a lot of things that are packed into very specific keywords that then need to be explained. But yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course, this depends a lot bit on the author, you know. If you read, I guess it depends on the author and it depends on the type of text, but it depends, I think, a lot on the author, you know. If you read texts that are written by Aryas, because Nagarjuna was an Arya, that's why we call him Arya Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna was an Arya. If you read texts like if you or if you read the text written by Sangha, Maitreya, you know, we're talking about bodhisattvas high in the bhumis, high on these stages, you know. And if you read texts written by those, that you know, then yeah, it's almost it's just studying a text like that is itself quite an experience because not only is poetic, but it's extremely precise in meaning and sometimes multi-layered. It is multi-layered. Is multi-layered in one like one stanza is multi-layered, and then the text like the text itself, the text itself in its different parts, it's sort of like interwebbed. It's almost inconceivable. It's like the type of thing that normal mind could not write. You can find that a lot if you read, listen, especially like yeah, texts that are composed by Aryas, by bodhisattvas high in the bhumis. It's it's itself quite an experience actually, and I'm particularly thinking now of a Sangha's texts, Maitreya, Nagarjuna. Um, yeah, it's quite fascinating, actually, quite beautiful. Anything else? No? Okay, then have a good evening, and I will see you next time.